And now we get to the horse that was teased a little while ago, and which clearly is the selection of both Frank, or one of the selections of both Frank and Sam. That's number 9, Acapella Bourgeois. Another Mullins horse. It beat Burroughs Saint in last time out and is currently priced at around 33 to 1, I believe. Yep. So
Yeah.
tell us why it's your selection.
Shall I go first? Or
Go for it.
Okay, I'll go first. So as you mentioned, like it beat Burroughs Saint at Fairyhouse at the national meet, so the Irish national meet, but not in the Irish national. What was interesting about that though was the weights, because it gave weight to Burroughs Saint, beat it, and now is coming into this well handicapped, or maybe even under handicapped. Maybe the handicap has looked at it badly. So it's going into this race at 10-12. And that still gives it less weight, I believe, than Burroughs Saint, which I find pretty strange in that respect. So I think Burroughs Saint's coming in maybe at like 10-13. So that seemed like a bit of a weird one for me. I think the handicap has got it a little bit wrong there. But also the form that Acapella Bourgeois has, it always runs on New Year's against Album Photo. So regardless of what we think about how much that horse tries in that race, it's still a good set of pedigrees and good racing form that it does have. But just going a little bit further from it, it has a good pedigree on softer ground. I don't think rain or shine. I think kind of Aintree is looking good for the conditions at the moment. Danny Mullins as a jockey, granted, is a bit of like a second preference, but has ridden the horse before. The 11-year-old aspect of Acapella Bourgeois kind of is a slight concern, but actually, if you look at its last runs over the past few years, I'd actually say it's aging better. Like the horse is getting better with age. So for me, I think 33 to 1 is I think it's a bit of a crazy price. I thought when I read this, I tried to look at the horse's entries before the odds, which is extremely borderline impossible. But I would have seen this as like a 20 to 1 horse, or an 18 to 1 horse, something like that. So 33 to 1 for me is a bit crazy. I think there's a really good value on it. I think it's got a really good pedigree, and I think everything's going for it. So I'd probably say this is like one of my best values, maybe even my tip for it.
Yeah, I'm right there with Sam. Basically, everything he said was the same kind of consensus I came to. I think it's one of my top 3 selections that I'm going to actually give. The other thing that you can argue too, or that people would argue against you, is that Burroughs Saint won the Irish Grand National in 2019 and beat Acapella Bourgeois. But again, the weights were way off there. So you're at much better terms in this race. So even though it had lost to Burroughs Saint in 2019, when you switch the weights, it probably wouldn't have lost that race. So I agree. Something didn't seem right to me. So either it's just something the handicappers missed, or there's another side of the story that Mullins isn't telling everyone and knows that Burroughs Saint is just primed for this race and Acapella Bourgeois is not.
What you've said there, my question to you both was going to be, can you truly back a horse with that many levels of variables at a 4 to 1 shot? No, I don't think you can. It is the best horse in the race, or at least it's the most it has the potential to be the most devastating, I think, because also it has a lot of good form against some fantastic horses. Like I Write, it's beaten Milan Native, it's beaten Ballyoptic, Taking Risks, it's beaten so many people in the field, but also some really good formed runners from Cheltenham as well. I can't back it. That, like, you've got 39 other runners, it's going into 30 fences, and you're expecting it to run as like a 4 to 1 shot. There's too many variables that will stop it. And it may pull away at the start. It may be the easiest win you'll ever see in your life. But I've seen enough Grand Nationals to say that very rarely is the case. And so for me, 4 to 1's too short.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's so short that a lot of the tips we've made today, you'd make more money on the each way bet of that horse than that than Cloth Cap even winning. So it's just way too short for me. For a horse, I mean, Tiger Roll was this price, but Tiger Roll was dominant the year before, and every sign pointed it to it almost being, like an easy win, like a shoe-in. This is not the same thing. Yes, it has looked great in its last 2 races. Yes, it is 14 pounds well in, but it doesn't have that reputation that Tiger Roll had coming into 2019. So I can't back it. I think there's a lot of other horses out there that you can back it in each way and get a better win just getting in the top 5, 6, whatever your firm's going to offer you.
You raise a very valid point there, that if assuming that you're getting 1 to 4, there are actually only 5 horses in which you would get smaller returns on them placing in an each way bet, or I suppose you could do a place only and get similar odds than you would on Cloth Cap to win. That being said, maybe Cloth Cap is more of a certainty to win than any other individual horses to place. I mean, that's the calculation you have to make in your head. And fundamentally, I would say that's true. Like, you can make a stronger argument for Cloth Cap winning than I think you can make for any of the opposition being kind of a lock to place. Now we get to my main selection of the Grand National, number 35, Minella Times. Not to be confused with Minella Celebration. Remember that. Do not mix up the two, because Minella Times is currently priced at 10 to 1, riding for the star of the Cheltenham Festival, ridden by even by the star of the Cheltenham Festival, Rachel Blackmore. Has looked basically better each time out this season. And
the horse or Rachel Blackmore?
Both, you could argue.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we're all going to look forward to seeing Rachel Blackmore pulling out her now iconic fist celebration, having just won the Grand National. So I think we've got to prepare for that. We've got to prepare the statues that will be made in years to come. It's actually, as much as I like the fact that you have an incredibly informed jockey, I do, and a good jockey, at the same time, the storyline of Rachel Blackmore following up all of that Cheltenham success by winning the Grand National, the combination seems so unlikely that I see that almost as a negative, even though it has no impact on the chances of the horses itself. But it's just so progressive. And I think on that ground, it has as good of a chance as any. And so it's my selection.
Yeah, I mean, it's a solid selection, right? You got the Bromhead and Blackmore together. You have a horse, its last outings were second, first, 16th, second, first, second. So overall, pretty consistent. All around 3 miles or up. So, the distance doesn't seem to be as terrible of an issue. But you're adding an extra mile there. So that's obviously going to be a little bit of a question mark, but it's a good pick. It's not mine, but I think it's a very solid pick for a good number of reasons.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid pick. The only, I have 2 slight issues, I guess. I worry a little bit about how much that's actually its true value because of the Bromhead Rachel Blackmore aspect of it, because I tried to look into like what it has done, and the one it won was a slight drop down. It was at Lestall. It isn't kind of the best racing, but when you look at the ones where it's run at Leopardstown under pretty good racing, granted, and very good, competent competition, one of the things that always seemed to come up is that it tracked well, ran well, and then just at the end, it gave no impression as it was kind of brought up against someone. So there's a slight concern about if the National is going to be quite close going into maybe the last 2 or 3 jumps with a pretty long run-in on the National, I might worry about a horse that may have a bit more stamina, or whether this is a horse that just doesn't know how to get its neck in front. It's a very, very minor point on, well, it could be a potentially major point, but it's a very minor floor on what is a pretty impressive horse, pretty impressive jockey booking, and I see why it is right up there in the betting. I just worry maybe if it's a little bit too deflated in pricing because of the booking.